let me introduce myself, and I'm going to introduce what we're about to talk about and go through and introduce our panel. But my name is Don Wilhelm. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Can y'all hear me, by the way? Everybody here okay? And I am the regional coordinator for a program that the Fish and Wildlife Service offers to private landowners. It's known as the Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program. So I work across 4 states, Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Arizona. But prior to accepting that position about 4 years ago, I was the Texas coordinator for that program. And so I just had a great time working in Texas with many great private Texas landowners and many great NGO representatives and agencies, Texas Parks and Wildlife biologists, NRCS folks. So we've got a great group of folks collectively in the state of Texas to help deliver financial and technical assistance to you guys that are interested in such things. And we're going to talk, this presentation is going to be focused on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, try to give you some good information about us. And then after this panel, there's going to be a presentation presented by Texas Parks and Wildlife and another Fish and Wildlife Service person. So back-to-back great presentations for you guys. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to interrupt us if you can't hear us or there's a question you want to have. But we hope to have time here at the end. We're going to try to get through our little presentations pretty quickly to allow time for questions at the end. So good luck to us. So the format for this presentation, and I guess it's better if I'm really close. Is that better? Okay. Everybody paying attention? I think you got to get pretty close for them to hear us. And this is being recorded, so we need to make sure we are seeing close. All right, so the panel today up here is, of course, myself, Cindy Watson, who is with the state coordinator for the Partners Program in Texas, Tim Anderson, who works down along the Texas coast primarily, and I'm not sure what he's shooting at here, but he's shooting at something here. And then another person was supposed to be with us, Brendan, and that's supposedly a picture of Brendan after a successful elk hunt. That's what he sent me. I don't know if that's Brendan or not, but he's not here for me to even pick on, but that's Brendan. And then Gary Price here is going to speak in a second about Partners for Conservation, a government organization that we work with quite a bit. And then Jim Willis is going to speak, a private landowner as well. And I'm going to give an overview of the Partners Program in just a second. And at the end, hopefully we'll have some questions and exchange of information. All right. So the Fish and Wildlife Service is a federal agency, and I think we have a mission that you guys can appreciate. It's working with others to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American public. That's what we're supposed to be doing every day in our work. The Endangered Species Act has an opening prologue that states its purpose. The purpose of the Endangered Species Act is to provide a means whereby the ecosystems upon which endangered species and threatened species may be conserved. That was the intent of Congress when they put that act together back in '73. Now, I have a new boss, a boss's boss, and his name is Ted Cook. So his philosophy, he merges those two things, our mission and the endangered species purpose. And so this is what he tells us to do. We're supposed to work with others to conserve, protect, and enhance the ecosystems upon which we and all other species depend. So that's what he tells us that we should be doing as well. Ted's an avid hunter and fisherman. I can get that out. And if you have an opportunity to ever hear him speak, he's a great speaker, and he is setting, I think, a pretty good direction for the Fish and Wildlife Service in our region in terms of working with private landowners and benefiting all manner of fish and wildlife species. So, again, I'm with the Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program. We're in a branch of the Fish and Wildlife Service known as Ecological Services. You may be more familiar with our National Wildlife Refuge System, or we have law enforcement folks called Special Agents. But there's a branch of the Fish and Wildlife Service known as Ecological Services, and that's the branch that I'm under. And that's who Ted, that I just introduced, he administers the Ecological Services Program in our region. So what is the Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program? Quickly. It is a voluntary program for private landowners. It's similar in approach to what Texas Parks and Wildlife runs through their LIP program, or what NRCS may run through some of their various Farm Bill programs. It involves the restoration and management of federal trust species and their habitats. So what's a federal trust species? Those are species that migrate, like waterfowl, across state lines, and the rare or endangered species or threatened species as well kind of fall under that banner of a federal trust species. Our program involves landowner participation and cost sharing. And we don't do this alone by any stretch of the imagination. We have many partners. I've already talked about a few. We're going to, Texas Parks and Wildlife, NRCS. There's a collection of agencies and NGOs in this state that work really well together and partner up to get conservation on the ground. So why are programs like this important? Well, I think you guys probably know this in Texas, but 75% of all restorable and degraded habitats is on private lands in our country. In Texas, about 97% is privately controlled. A smaller amount is actually owned, but there's a lot of Texas land is leased out that's owned by the state of Texas to private landowners. And so, obviously, private landowners hold the key to managing fish and wildlife populations. And here's some examples of some projects we've worked on around the state. So, we offer financial and technical assistance, but we have a very small staff. Believe it or not, Texas Parks and Wildlife, NRCS, all these folks together, collectively, we have just a small number of people that can actually work directly with private landowners. So we all try to be strategic in how and set priority areas that we try to work on. Here's a map of what within the Fish and Wildlife Service we set as our priority. We call them focus areas within our program. Don't have time to necessarily go into why we pick them or things like that, but if you have questions, certainly ask. But we do try to allocate our people and financial resources into high priority areas. So I think we'd all agree that we're all after wildlife habitat improvement. And so you have an area like this that perhaps has an exotic grass growing in there. You know, the quail and the monarchs might come by, but, you know, they're not going to linger very long. So what we're all after here, I do believe, is something along this lines. You take what was once a degraded habitat, and we come back, and there's livestock, there's pollinators, there's deer, there's quail, and the landowner and the wildlife are both happy. So that makes Tim happy too. So that's a good thing. So a couple of things real quick, not to get into too far into detail, but, you know, the Fish and Wildlife Service offers some tools to landowners if they're working with an imperiled species and they're worried about things like the Endangered Species Act or other types of federal may be perceived as overreach. We have various things known as assurances, and assurances are voluntary measures that person would do on their private land. That would provide some regulatory certainty. There's two main things that people often use: CCAs, Candidate Conservation Agreements with Assurances, and Safe Harbors Agreements. Basically, it just means you do good things for this rare species, and you can take your property back to those original habitat conditions after a period of time. That's the intent in a nutshell of those two types of agreements that offer assurances to private landowners. I want to talk real quick about something I think is pretty cool. The NRCS and the Fish and Wildlife Service joined forces, if you will, to come up with an approach to incentivize folks working on rare species habitats across the country. It's run through the Working Lands for Wildlife program. You may have heard about that through the Farm Bill programs, NRCS programs. But as long as the landowner follows their conservation plan that was developed for their property and to implement whatever conservation measures they put on the ground, they can keep going and do those same things into the future, no matter the regulatory situation for that particular species. So it could be a candidate species, it could become endangered later. Nothing changes on their property the way they're managing it. They just follow that conservation plan and they're good to go. This has been in effect just for a few years. Here's a map of some of the priority areas. There's some new ones here in Texas. You'll notice the Colorado River aquatic species. That's a brand new one. Louisiana pine snake is a new one. But I think it's a really neat opportunity for the public and private sectors to get together and prioritize some of their work to help recover some of these rare species and the habitats they represent. So that is the end of my presentation. Again, I hope I probably generated more questions than answers I provided you there, but I want to just kind of give you a quick overview of the Partners Fish and Wildlife Program and the Fish and Wildlife Service. So now I'm going to turn it over to a couple of landowners who have worked with us. And let me first introduce Gary Price and his wife Sue's out in the audience there. And I've had just the pleasure of knowing these two folks for, I don't know, at least 15. We don't need to go back further than 15 years. Let's just say 15 years. And we've worked with them on some grassland restoration work, some wetland restoration work of their property. And then they're just great spokespeople for conservation and private lands conservation efforts across Texas and abroad, actually. Gary has worked as a board member for the Partners for Conservation NGO organization. He works with San County Almanac Foundation in a program known as Water as a Crop. He's been a director of the Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association. He's now working also with the Noble Foundation out of Oklahoma on carbon and ecosystems services. There's a group of folks that are working on that collectively. And he's been the past chairman of the Texas Grazing Lands Coalition. So Gary is not an idle person, but here he is. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Don, very, very much. Thanks for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for being here this morning as well. I guess I'll talk to the whole bunch out there, and if I'm loud enough, maybe I can. We thought about moving one of these panels here, and where somebody would get into the panel, and then they would be directed in here. We can get a bigger audience. But thank you for being here this morning. It's really a pleasure. My wife is a director of TWA, so we've been to this organization for many years, and it's a pleasure to be here. We're a cow-calf operation. We're south of Dallas, about 50 miles, Navarre County and Ellis County. And the ranch now is about 2,600 acres. Most of that is deeded land. There's a little bit of lease land with that. And we're working this week trying to buy another property that joins us. And I was telling a friend a while ago, now when we buy land, I have to justify running cattle on there, but I have to compete with somebody that wants a view of a lake or a big oak tree there for a building site. And that's okay. We're free market people, so we'll compete with that. So I want to really emphasize to you the importance through the years, any progress that we've made with the ranch through the years. We've done that by having great relationships with people like U.S. Fish and Wildlife, NRCS in the back of the room there, Partners for Conservation, Texas Parks and Wildlife, Texas Wildlife Association. We like to think that we're all in this together. You know, if we're over here, and I can tell you 35 years ago, we were over here kind of by ourselves. Our gates were pretty well locked, and if you were with the government, you didn't come in. But I'm here to tell you that has changed tremendously. Now, I'm an Aggie, so we would let, some AgriLife Extension folks in, and a county agent. We had a close relationship there. But that whole relationship with all of those organizations has changed through the years, and we like to see that overlap and what we can do together. One of the things that's been said before, and really believe this, that, we like to look at the 80% we agree on with any organization, work with that, and then take the 20% that maybe we don't agree on everything, put that on the shelf. And I've learned to do that, box it up, put it up there, put a bow around it, and just leave that alone. So we're working closely with many, many organizations, and it's really worked well for us. As I said, we're 50 miles now from 7.2 million people in the Metroplex, and they're coming our way. That can be a benefit because we do fishing leasing, we do duck leasing, we've built projects with Fish and Wildlife, with duck habitat, we've built wetland with Ducks Unlimited, so we understand that that's a bigger part of what we do going forward. I used to think that would not really integrate good with the cattle operation, but I can tell you it's worked really well. It's probably about 20% of our income now. This is a picture of our family, our son Gary Lee. He'll come back to the ranch someday. I made the mistake of telling him not to come back until he got married, and he's 38 and he's not married yet, so I didn't know it was going to take so long. No, he's a great kid. He runs a ranch north of Jacksboro, and he's worked for Matador Ranch in West Texas for a while, so he's getting great experience. I've told him, if you can learn to ranch where it doesn't rain, maybe you can come back home and make it work where we get a little bit more rain. This is my wife, Sue. She's in the audience today, and that's the greatest partnership I've really got. If that one doesn't work, none of these others will work either. And we don't agree on everything either. So we put that 20% up on the shelf and don't deal with it. Look at the 80% we agree on and try to move forward. looking down the line, looking to the future. We use horses. We like to pen cattle with horses and doctor cattle with horses. And my son and I have got a mare that we're breeding now that we think will produce a colt that'll be a brood mare someday for him, and get him continuing down that process of producing good horses. This is an example of a cooperation we did with Texas Parks and Wildlife. National Wild Turkey Federation was part of this, a turkey release. We had a few wild turkeys in our area, but they came in. These turkeys came from Johnson City, and they came from a ranch up at the JA Ranch up at Pampa. They've done very well, and we don't have a season for turkey yet, but hopefully that'll be opened up someday. But they've done very well, and I'll see 8 or 15 toms in one bunch, and you want to put them on the dinner table, but we've not been given that priority yet. This is a project we're really excited about. We used to lease for quail hunting. And, of course, we're just a little bit east of I-35. We've lost most of our quail in that area. The biologist, Jay Whiteside with Parks and Wildlife, has told us it's primarily loss of habitat, good connective area, but and we still had a few wild birds left. So they've only done this 2 other times in the state, but we're actually trapping birds down near Mexico at Eagle Pass, bringing them back to the ranch, putting 10% of those birds will have radio transmitters on them, following them around. They've been out now about 21 months. Dale Rollins, in fact, has given us about 100 birds. So we're commingling those, and they're doing very, very well. They're nesting. We've got videos now of some of the broods they're raising. So this is a pilot project that could work in other parts of the state. But it's a great example of cooperation. Someone has an idea that might work with you, and it's absolutely working with us. We hope to get to a level of these birds will have a huntable population again. Again, quite a resource. We go to Park City's quail every year in Dallas, their big fundraiser, raised $1.7 million one night. All of it goes to quail research. We know we've got a tremendous number of quail enthusiasts, quail hunters in the Metroplex. We may not be able to compete with Matador, Texas, or Albany, Texas, with quail hunting, but we do know we can compete with them on how quick they can get to our place, bring their dogs, bring their grandkids, and show them the benefit of good quail populations and be able to hunt. This is another enterprise we've got is a fishing enterprise, fishing lease. We stock everything with Florida bass. It's worked really well for us, and especially with the duck hunting. And many of those duck hunters are not fishermen, and many of the fishermen are not duck hunters. It took us a couple of years to figure that out, so we've separated those leases. But again, it's done very well. Just want to tell you that, again, emphasize the importance of all of these agencies that are out there working with them, whether it be NRCS, whether it be the Texas Grazing Lands Coalition. They've got a booth here. I'm past chairman of that organization. Jenny Pluhar can help you with that. Through NRCS, we have 10 grazing specialists throughout the state that can absolutely sit down with you and work with you on a grazing plan for your operation. If you don't know what you're grazing, it's hard to manage it. You have to know plant identity. You have to know the importance of those grasses, the importance of water quality, and what water can do for your operation. But that's a resource that's available to you. I've never, in all of my years, seen the opportunity be any greater than we've got today through these organizations to further whatever your goals are on the ranch. This is a picture taken just a few days ago. My wife and I were out riding around on the Ranger, and it's perfectly still. This is a lake that was built back in 1957, flood prevention dam, and was really never completed, and it was really a mud hole when we bought that property about 40 years ago. So we've now got that stocked with Florida bass. duck habitat's really good in the shallow areas. So we're producing income from that. We enjoy what that's produced, and being able to see the wildlife habitat increase around there. We saw the first deer on the ranch about 6 years ago. So that's kind of a new thing with us. It's no, not in this area, but we're looking at possibly at some point being able to selectively hunt those deer. I know down in this area you don't selectively hunt them too much. You'd like to get rid of some of them. But that's a new enterprise that we'll have going forward. Again, Partners for Conservation was mentioned. It's an organization made up of landowners throughout the United States. I've been fortunate to be on the board for several years with that, and we'll range all the way from a rancher in Kansas to ranchers in Utah to a forester in Georgia, but we're all landowners, and we come together with various problems, various challenges, and we look for solutions through collaboration with those other organizations. We've just recently formed a new relationship with NRCS and Working Lands, and we know where we have these situations where we have the possibility of a species being listed. We want to prevent that if we can by working with these other organizations, seeing what habitat changes need to be made to prevent that from being listed, if at all possible. And we have some good success stories. I've got some brochures here I'll put in the back of the room in a little bit, and you can pick those up. Tells a little bit more about that organization, but can't stress enough the importance of not being over here like I used to be 40 years ago, but meshing that together. We've got to tell our story to the urban population. One last thing. We're working closely with Noble Foundation on the importance of what we do on the land with good stewardship, with sequestering carbon through growing grass, and how we're also benefiting those ecosystem services with water, wildlife, and we're trying to create a private market for that where we'll be able to incentivize landowners to do good conservation work through growing grass, filtering water. You know, what we do absolutely benefits those in the urban areas. This is a program that hopefully that we'll be able to market that and be able then to incentivize the landowners to do more. Thank you very much. Look forward to your questions.
Howdy. As y'all know, Texas is blessed to have a lot of really competent private landowners, and I've been blessed to learn from a bunch of them. And one of the first landowners that I worked with when I came back to Texas about 18 years ago was Jim Willis, and I've really learned a lot from Jim. And I think the thing that's impressed me the most about Jim is not only how well he manages his own place, but I really admire his disciple-making ability. You know, Jim has been really good about getting out with his neighbors and showing them the things that have worked for him on his place and encouraging them to apply them on their places as well. And so the benefits of Jim's stewardship extend well beyond his property lines. So, Jim, I really appreciate you coming up here, and would you mind spending a little bit to share some of your experiences with us? Thank you, sir.
The world will little know nor long remember what we say here today, but it will never forget what we did here. Those words of Abraham Lincoln 154 years ago at Gettysburg pretty much say it all to me as far as what we do in the conservation community. It's not that we say it, that we do it. Another friend of mine in the conservation community, Jason Hardin, who came along about the same time Tim did, used to say the conservation stops when the wheels quit turning. So, you know, I guess my testimony today to you is that We have progressed because Fish and Wildlife Service and others. But as Tim said, they were one of the first to come to me and help me move forward this program to just improve my property. And when we got our property, it was this. It was a wildlife desert. And pretty much everybody told me I had bought a wildlife desert. And that would really discourage most folks. And they would, but it only empowered me. I was going to prove to them that I could make this into a wildlife sanctuary. About that time that we bought this property, a young biologist from Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Reserve, Mutual Admiration Society here, Tim. Tim came over, a young biologist, young according to my standards anyway, and took me by the hand and started walking me through the process. Now, up to that time, my methodology was fail fast, fix fast, and it wasn't getting me too far along. I needed some expertise, and I needed some equipment. So anyway, Tim shows up one day with a tractor, an old John Deere tractor, and a drill, a no-till drill that's seen its better days, and a bag of native grass local ecotype seed. And we planted 100 acres with that old drill. And but one of the things that really happened, though, was that bag of local ecotypes that we planted, Tim, that was the beginning that launched us into a recovery of this property. That's the same field, from a different angle. That's the same field. And that is a cow out there in the middle of it. That turnaround was so impacting on me, because Fish and Wildlife Service had extended to me more than just a financial help. But Tim and others there, we got a lot of help from several. They don't have lots of people, but they have good people. And they came down. I even got a bale buster, Tim, and we used that. Any piece of equipment we could pull together to start planting. But anyway, this beginning field was the shot heard round the community, and maybe further than that, around the region. Hey, that stuff works. And nobody will listen to you better. Terry Rockdenall, your former boss there at Atwater, told me, he said, you can do, as a landowner, get more attention in a day than I can get in 20 years. This federal sticker on my shoulder, they look at that, oh, here's the government again. The government is great. I mean, if we didn't have that facility there, I don't know where the quail would be today, or the prairie chicken. But if you're a landowner and you can go out there and do it and persist, other landowners are going to come to you first. Not that we're better. We're not as good as these people that are trained, but they got to see it. You got to show them. And this field was the beginning of a corridor. It started up here. That's my place here. It ran for 7 miles. We used Russell. We used that. We were the first recipient of the SIG. We got that SIG program because we had shown some success, y'all. So we got that program to help with it, and other help from state and Texas Parks and Wildlife kicked in, and we built that wildlife corridor, and it went all the way from my place to the Atwater Prairie Chicken National Wildlife Refuge, which is 10,000 acres. So, and you can see in perspective how big that corridor was. It looked like this. It was 7 miles long, as I said, from my ranch. You saw the first field. It went 7 miles. We built a fence that bordered the existing perimeter fence, 150 feet wide corridor. And that's my quail-proof fence between there and where we were. There's Bahia's on the right side. That's what that field looked like before we established that corridor. And it just turned to quail. Texas A&M found 31 species of upland birds. So it convinced us that we were doing something right. And people started coming to us. Today, we've already impacted 30,000 acres, and we're now currently working on additional 20,000 acres, and that's a long way from the first 100 acres that we planted, Tim. But we got people coming to us. We're not having to go out and sell it, because we have the equipment, We have the know-how. Many of you have met Gary Stevens, who was with NRCS for a while, came to us now. He's our leading biologist and program director. So we go all over now. But the secret is putting it on the ground. And I learned that from that tractor and that drill, Tim, that you brought down to us. And we now have scenes like this. This is one I took, I guess it was last year, on my place in front of my house. But that field even is better today. It's absolutely gorgeous with all kinds of native grasses. But he said, "Oh, I can't hear the sound not up, but I got dogs on point and got quail everywhere." But I remind you that, we've learned one thing about this whole program that FWS has taught me and NRCS and all the others. But the land is a resource. It's not just a resource. It's a source of life. And we're part of that community. And we got to work together. And the way to do this is with showing people that we can do it, giving them hope, bringing the machinery, supplying them with plans. But you got to show them. At some point in time, you can talk about it. We got to do something about it. And the Fish and Wildlife Service has stuck with us. I asked him today, "Why did you choose us?" Well, they have to see somebody that has a passion, not just in the right place and not have the right land, but have the passion for it. And if you have passion, there's people that can give you the financial help. But more importantly, we can, and people like us can put it on the ground because we have the equipment. We got 4 no-till drills right now, keeping them going. And I think this picture right here tells it all. Those 3 plants, native grass plants, that I nailed to the side of my barn, have 10 feet long roots. And that's what it's all about. Those are the plants that were originally here, originally in the prairie. And Houston wouldn't have the mass flooding from Katrina or from this recent storm it had this kind of root system. It would have helped anyway. So you might say that our relationship with the Fish and Wildlife Service could be characterized as our roots run deep. I hope that if you need help, not just to talk about it, to do something about it, that we are stretching out and helping others throughout the region and other places in the state. But if you want to see it done, come visit us. We can give you a tour. And again, I want to use this opportunity again to thank the Fish and Wildlife Service and all the others in the government that have helped us. Like Gary said, it takes a community, and we've had that community working with us, and I appreciate every bit of the time that they've spent holding us by the hand and walking us through it. Thank you.
Got one quick closing slide, and then we'll hopefully have time for some questions. So, before everybody leaves, I want a round of applause for you two guys. You did a great job. Thank you all so much. But in summary, I think wildlife conservation in the 21st century, it's not going to get any easier. I think we're all aware of the challenges we're going to be facing. Solutions depend on effective communication and partnerships. The 80-20 rule Gary mentioned, I hope y'all picked up on that. There's plenty of things written about it. It's focus on the 80% that we all agree on, and we can get some stuff done. You guys, private landowners, are the key. They're the centerpiece of any of these partnerships, especially in Texas. And the Fish and Wildlife Service, through our Partners Program, hopefully we've convinced you a little bit that we really are here to help. We've got some great people on staff. There's other great partnerships out there, other great folks working for agencies and NGOs that can provide you guys with some great technical, if not financial, assistance. So that is our end of our presentation, but hopefully you have a few questions for the panel. Any of our panel members? Maybe we were that good. We were that thorough. If there aren't any questions from y'all, I may ask questions of you. No, go ahead. So she asked about the photo had the 10-foot roof systems. Was that the grass that we planted initially?
I can say at least one of them was. But what's so amazing about that is the fact that that's 1 year growth. Phenomenal. If you water them, they got the genetics to do it. Plant them in sand helps too. They go down deep real quickly. But that's 1 year growth. Can you believe? And that was big blue stem, eastern gamma grass, and
switch.
It was switch. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Planting was hard, but digging them out of the ground was harder.
Could I add something?
Sure.
Yeah, we're fortunate enough on the ranch to have, we're in the Blackland Prairie ecosystem, so they're telling us that only or less than 1% of that prairie still remains that was never plowed. So we're fortunate to have some of that on the ranch. And I can tell you in 2011, when we had over 50 stock tanks that were completely dry, we thought we were going to become El Paso. Something had shifted, on the Earth's axis. Those native plants were still able to survive and keep going, and it really showed us. We like to think that remnant part of the prairie has been a great teacher through the years, but it showed us, the resiliency of those plants, what he's demonstrated there. So we replant many old cotton fields that were on the ranch. We've replanted those to natives. They've done well. It's not a quick fix. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But we've got some of those that have really done well. And where you saw the quail picture, that was an old cotton field that was replanted with natives, and there's a lot of Alamo switch in there now and has done really well.
Yes, sir.
What's the most efficient way to start a conversation with your agency?
So the question is, what is the most efficient way to start a conversation with my agency or any of them for that matter? So probably the best way is the way we get good referrals in is from word of mouth. Talk to a neighbor, see who they worked with. You can always go down to the local NRCS that has an office in almost every county, and hopefully they can refer folks to, if you want to talk to somebody quickly and get a referral that way. Of course, we all have great websites too. There's just so much information now. I will tell you, it almost can be a little intimidating. There's so much information out there. So we're aware of that, and we all talk about what to do to make it less intimidating. So that is a challenge. I will admit to that. Even for me, sometimes I'll just trying to keep up with all the information. Look what's here today, and you'll see a lot of folks that have an interest and are there to help, but somehow their little niche is just a little bit different. And there's private sources. Plateau spoke before us. That's a private group, and there's other consultants that do great jobs also in providing you the technical information that is needed. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We have pamphlets in the back too that have a map of all of our contacts.
Yeah. And we're a nonprofit, and I probably get 5 calls a day from people, and people that maybe in our CS may refer them to us because they know somebody eventually has, as my point today is, put it on the ground. You got to eventually get that. And so whoever you call, make sure they have either the good contacts or they are involved in actually planning or doing all the practices that Laudo Leopold preached years ago to do. So we get people, like you mentioned Plateau, we do the same thing, except we're a nonprofit. We go out and we'll site visit, and we will draw you up a management plan, and then do a turnkey whatever. How much you want, it depends on how far away you are and how much you want to spend. But it's not cheap, but it cost me. I wish I had me around back then when I started. I've learned and made so many mistakes because I didn't rely on the good help there was there. I thought I could do it myself, but I tell you, you'll save money by getting the right plan and finding somebody that can actually do the whole work, the job. We have a website. WHF-Texas.org. Go on there and we'll give you a plan, but we'll end up trying to get financial help from many government sources that we can, or private, to help you.
Well, thank y'all for your time very much. Enjoy your stay. Thank y'all.
Mark your calendar now for next year's Texas Wildlife Association 34th Annual Convention, coming up July 11th through 14th of 2019 in San Antonio. This is a production of Roland Recording.